One of the things that we did not predict is that Back to the Future would still be popular. Bob Zemeckis and I are absolutely amazed and delighted that these movies have stood the test of time and that each succeeding generation loves these movies. They can recite dialogue from these movies. They want to play Johnny Be Good. In the summer of 1980, I was visiting my parents in St. Louis, Missouri, which is where I grew up, and I discovered my father's high school yearbook. I attended the same high school that my father had attended, and I'd never seen his yearbook before, and I flipped through the book, and I discovered that my father had been the president of his graduating class. I didn't know this, and then I thought about the president of my graduating class, who was somebody I would have nothing to do with. And then I started to wonder, was my father like the president of my class? And if I had gone to high school with my dad, would I have been friends with him or not?
I have been looking all over for you.
And that is the moment where I said, there's a movie there. And when I came back to California, I told the idea to Bob Zemeckis, and he said, yeah, and what if your mom went to the same high school? And what if it turned out that she was a loose girl in high school, and everything that your parents told you about the way things were when they were growing up turned out to be completely wrong?
Lorraine, what are you doing?
But what we decided to do was to do a time travel story where the main character didn't want to travel through time.
1955.
Marty didn't want to go to 1955. It was an accident. And so the only thing he wants to do, he doesn't like it in 1955. He wants to come home. That's his entire focus. And then he realizes that he has to repair the damage that he caused between his parents. He's not trying to change anything. He would be very happy to come back to the exact same 1985 that he left. So he inadvertently changes history by teaching his father to become a man.
You, George McFly, are a fighter. You're somebody who's going to stand up for yourself, somebody who's going to protect her.
And the other thing was that the only history that we change is the history of the McFly family and the fictional characters that we created. So Ronald Reagan is the President of the United States at the beginning of the movie, and he's still the President at the end of the movie when 1985 is changed. So we just changed the McFly family. All the characters in the movie that Bob and I write has a little bit of all of us, both of us, in them. Well, I was not a musician, but Bob Zemeckis was. He had a rock band when he was a kid in high school, so some of that probably came out of him. I don't remember him talking about doing any auditions and whether he tried to play at a school dance, but look, it's everybody's fantasy to get in front of an audience and perform Johnny Be Good, right? In the early drafts of the script, the time machine was stationary, and only the time traveler traveled through time. The time machine stayed exactly where it was. So with that in mind, Marty could only travel to where the time machine actually existed. And then when it came time to actually have the movie into production, Bob Zemeckis started thinking, wouldn't it be better if the time machine was already mobile? So he came in the office one day and he said, I got a great idea, let's put it in a DeLorean. And I know a great idea when I hear one, and that was a great idea.
The way I see it, if you're gonna build a time machine into a car, why not do it with some style?
When we made the first movie, we had no idea that it was going to be successful, so we weren't thinking about doing a sequel. People say, well, with that ending, you guys must have been thinking about a sequel.
Roads? Where we're going, we don't need roads.
Well, no, it's a very satisfying ending whether there's a sequel or not. And as Bob Zemeckis has said many times, if we knew we were going to do a sequel, we wouldn't have had Jennifer get in the car. Because when it came time for us to try to figure out what are we going to write here, how's the sequel going to work, one of the questions we had, what are we going to do with Jennifer? Because she's not really a very well-defined character. And the solution that we came up with was Doc knocks her out. She's unconscious for the whole part two.
I wonder where we live. I bet it's a big house with lots of kids and... How many kids?
Doc, what the hell are you doing?
And a lot of people say, well, I remember when I saw the movie the first time, it says to be continued at the end of it. Well, we put that on the VHS tape when we knew we were making a sequel. But the theatrical version and the DVDs and the Blu-rays, they do not have to be continued.
The time continuum has been disrupted, creating this new temporal event sequence resulting in this alternate reality.
English, Doc.
Back to the Future 2 and 3 were very complicated, and it's exemplified by the scene when Doc has to draw the timeline on the chalkboard. And we wrote that scene because we thought the audience would be confused, needed to really kind of get a map of how all this time travel stuff worked out. And then, of course, the idea that we went back into the first movie, very literally, I think we're the first movie to do that because we had a time machine and we could. It was a great idea to revisit these same scenes and see them from a different point of view and see the things that were going on sort of in between the scenes.
Talk about deja vu.
And I think it's one of the things that makes Back to the Future Part 2 a very, very interesting movie.
The future.
Well, when Bob and I started to figure out what our future 2015 was going to look like, and we knew we weren't going to be able to predict the future correctly because nobody ever does. So our agenda was, it's a comedy, so it should be a lot of fun, it should be entertaining. We want to present the future as a very optimistic place. We didn't want to do Blade Runner. We wanted the future to be fun. So some of the technology that we came up with were based on things that we did in the first movie. The flying cars, of course, the hoverboards. Amazing that people are not trying to invent them.
Out of my way, birds!
So we knew we had to have a dinner table scene. And so we thought, okay, what are the type of things that could be going on at the dinner table? We came up with the pizza hydrator.
Hydrate level 4, please.
We didn't think that was going to actually happen. But the idea that you could watch television through glasses and maybe get phone calls.
Dad, telephones, needles.
That was something that seemed to make sense. That was something that was being talked about. So there was a lot of research that we did on things that were in the works and ideas that we had of things that could happen. The flat screen televisions, that was something that was in the works, that was being talked about. The idea that you could do home video conferencing like Skype.
McFly!
So it was a combination of what would be believable and what are we going to get a laugh from. Part 2 was going to go from 2015 to 1985A to 1955 back to 1885, and it was too much for one movie, so we decided it needed to be 2 movies, and we would let the Part 3 breathe and really develop it nicely and do everything that we've always wanted to do in a Western. So it was kind of a fantasy for us to come true, to be able to actually do a Western. It seemed right for the movie because the clock tower is a character in these movies, and we go back and we see the origin of the clock tower. So it all seemed like this all made sense. It's a very American story. Seamus McFly is the first of the McFly families to come to America, and it just seemed right.
Back to the Future Part 2. Let's get this.
Yeah, let's get this. We've only rented it about, a dozen times already.
So we were thinking to ourselves, okay, in the future, people are going to be able to watch all 3 of these movies one right after the other. So we were very conscious of that when Bob designed his shots, when he thought about how am I going to do this. And of course, in the script, every movie has the same gag where Marty gets knocked out and he wakes up. And of course, we're going to film that in the same way. And then Part 3 does the interesting thing where we have the dramatic persona of the characters reversed, where Marty is the one telling Doc, you can't alter time, and Doc is saying, I got to alter time, I'm in love. So that was kind of a nice dramatic thing to take the movies in a full circle. And that's one of the reasons, of course, that we always tell people, no, we don't ever want to think about a Part 4, because the holy trinity of these 3 movies, they all work together so perfectly, and we don't want to do anything that would mess that up.
Great Scott.
I know. heavy.
Nothing could be greater as a filmmaker, as a storyteller, to create something that resonates through time, through all cultures, because we've captured a really interesting story, human story, that everybody can understand and identify with. What were my parents like when they were kids? What would it have been like to be a fly on the wall at my parents' first date? It's an idea that everybody, every human being has had.
A fly on the wall.